Drax stood perfectly still in the observation chamber, his massive form casting long shadows across the metal floor. He was over 9 feet tall, with dark crimson scales that caught the light like polished armor. His claws tapped against the data pad as he scrolled through the information about these new creatures the Krell fleet had captured just hours ago. Humans. That's what they called themselves. The door hissed open and 6 Krell guards marched in, weapons drawn, surrounding 3 prisoners. Drax's golden eyes narrowed as he studied them. They were tiny. The tallest one barely reached his chest. They had smooth, soft skin with no scales, no natural armor, no visible weapons growing from their bodies. Their movements were slow compared to Krell warriors. Everything about them screamed weakness. One of the prisoners caught his attention immediately. A young female with dark brown hair pulled back in what remained of a military braid. Her name tag read Hayes R. Her uniform was standard military issue, torn at the shoulder and stained with dirt. Rachel Hayes. According to the data, she was a scout, 26 years old, specializing in reconnaissance and survival training. She looked terrified. Her hands were shaking slightly, restrained behind her back. But her eyes were sharp, darting around the room, taking in every detail. Every exit. Every guard position. Every weapon. Drax had seen that look before and captured warriors from other species. She was afraid, but she was also thinking. Planning. Commander Vex entered the chamber, his heavy footsteps echoing off the walls. He was the Krell Dominion's chief interrogator, famous throughout the fleet for breaking prisoners in record time. His green scales were darker than most, almost black, and his eyes held no warmth whatsoever. Vex circled the 3 humans slowly, studying each one like a predator selecting prey. He stopped in front of Rachel. "This one," he announced, his voice a deep rumble. "She appears the most fragile. Soft. Weak. We'll start with her." 2 guards grabbed Rachel by the arms and dragged her toward the center of the room. She struggled, trying to dig her heels into the floor, but she weighed nothing compared to the Krell soldiers. They lifted her like she was made of paper. "Wait!" one of the other human prisoners shouted, a male with short blonde hair. "Leave her alone. I'm the senior officer here, interrogate me first." Vex didn't even look at him. He gestured lazily and a guard struck the man across the face, silencing him. Drax watched as they strapped Rachel into the neural chair. It was a Krell interrogation device that had been perfected over centuries. The chair itself looked almost comfortable, but the technology inside was anything but. Neural disruptors would send artificial pain signals directly into the prisoner's nervous system. Pure agony with no physical damage. No scars. No evidence. Just pain. It was effective. Drax had witnessed 47 different species break under the neural chair. Some lasted hours. The strongest lasted days. But they all broke eventually. Vex had assigned Drax to document everything. Record the humans' responses, measure their pain tolerance, catalog their breaking point. This information would go into the Dominion's xenobiology database, helping the Krell understand and conquer any future human resistance. Drax activated his recording equipment and took his position at the observation console. From here he could see Rachel's face clearly. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her wrists strained against the metal restraints, testing them, but they didn't budge. Vex approached the chair slowly, deliberately drawing out the moment. "Human," he said, his voice cold and formal. "You will provide us with access codes to your military defense networks. You will tell us the locations of your hidden bases. You will give us everything we ask for." Rachel lifted her head and met his gaze directly. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. A defiant one. "Go to hell," she said quietly. Vex's expression didn't change, but Drax saw his claws flex slightly. The commander walked to the control panel beside the chair and placed his hand on the activation switch. "You misunderstand your situation, human," Vex said. "This device has broken warriors far stronger than you. Beings with natural armor, enhanced healing, pain resistance built into their biology. You have none of these advantages. You are soft, fragile, weak." Rachel's smile faded. Her jaw clenched tight, muscles standing out along her neck. "Last chance," Vex growled. "The codes." Rachel took a deep breath. Drax watched her hands ball into fists. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and when she opened them again, something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was locked away behind something else. Determination. Stubbornness. Pure human will. "No," she whispered. Vex's claw moved. The switch clicked. The device activated, and Rachel Hayes began to scream. Rachel's scream cut through the observation chamber like a knife. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the sound of every nerve in her body firing at once, telling her brain that she was dying even though no physical harm was being done. Her back arched violently against the restraints, her muscles locked so tight that Drax could see them trembling from across the room. He forced himself to focus on the data pad in his claws. That was his job. Document everything. Record the readings. His fingers moved across the screen, typing mechanically. Neural response, extreme levels. Cardiovascular stress, significantly elevated. Respiratory rate, critical. Subject vocalizing acute distress. Cold, clinical words for something that felt wrong to witness. Again, Commander Vex ordered, his voice emotionless. The intensity increased. Rachel's scream somehow got worse, higher-pitched, more desperate. Her fingers clawed at the armrests of the chair, nails scraping against metal. The sound made Drax's scales prickle. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall. 15 minutes had passed. Most species broke within 10 minutes at this level. They begged, they pleaded, they gave up every piece of information they had. But Rachel hadn't said a word. Just screaming. Vex decreased the intensity for a moment, giving her a chance to speak. Rachel's head dropped forward, her breathing ragged and desperate. Sweat dripped from her hair onto the floor. The codes? Vex demanded. Give them to me and this ends. Rachel lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. For a moment Drax thought she would break. But then her eyes focused on Vex and she shook her head. Not even a word. Just defiance. Vex's jaw tightened. He turned the device back on, this time at an even higher setting. The hours crawled by like years. Drax kept documenting, kept recording, but his hands felt heavy. At the 30-minute mark, Rachel's screams became hoarse. Her voice was giving out from the strain. At 45 minutes, she could barely make sound anymore, just gasping, choking noises as her body convulsed. Drax had been a warrior for 17 years. He'd fought in 12 major campaigns across 8 star systems. He'd seen soldiers die in battle. He'd witnessed the destruction of enemy ships with thousands aboard. He'd done his duty without question or hesitation. But this was different. This wasn't battle. This was something else entirely. He found himself looking away from the observation window, pretending to check his data pad. But he could still hear it. The awful, wet, gasping sounds Rachel was making as her body tried and failed to process the overwhelming signals of pain. At the 2-hour mark, Vex called for a brief pause. Rachel hung limply in the restraints, barely conscious. Her head lolled to one side. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing. One of the other Krell guards shifted uncomfortably. "Commander," he said quietly, "perhaps we should." "Continue," Vex snapped. "Humans are an unknown species. We need to establish their baseline breaking point for the database." The device activated again. This time Rachel didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat was too damaged. But her body still reacted, still fought against the restraints with whatever strength remained. Drax checked the readings again. Her heart rate was dangerously elevated. Her blood pressure was spiking to levels that should have caused organ failure. By all scientific measurements, she should have been dead already. Or at least unconscious. But somehow she was still aware, still feeling everything. 3 hours. That's how long it lasted. 3 hours that felt like 3 days. The intensity had been increased far beyond what the database said was survivable for carbon-based lifeforms. The neural disruptor was outputting pain signals that would have killed 43 of the 47 species in Krell records within the first hour. But Rachel was still breathing. Finally, mercifully, her eyes rolled back in her head and her body went completely limp. Unconscious at last. Vex stepped away from the control panel and examined her with clinical interest. "Fascinating," he muttered. 3 hours and 12 minutes before complete neural shutdown. That's remarkable durability for such a fragile-looking species. He gestured to the guards. "Take her to holding cell 7. Standard post-interrogation protocol. We'll resume tomorrow once she's had time to think about cooperation." 2 guards unstrapped Rachel from the chair. Her body was completely dead weight, arms hanging uselessly. They carried her out like she was a broken toy, her head rolling against one guard's shoulder. The door closed behind them and the chamber fell silent. Vex began reviewing his own notes, already planning tomorrow's session. The other guards filed out to return to their stations. Drax stood alone in the observation chamber, staring at the empty neural chair. There was sweat on the armrests where Rachel's hands had been. Scratches in the metal from her fingernails. He pulled up the standard protocol data on his pad. After a session of this length and intensity, subjects typically remained in a catatonic state for 3 to 5 days. Complete mental shutdown. Some never fully recovered their cognitive functions. Most developed severe trauma responses that made them compliant and easy to control. Drax filed his report, keeping his words professional and detached. But as he walked back to his quarters, he couldn't stop hearing that sound. The desperate, broken gasping of someone enduring the impossible. He told himself it was just part of war. Just another interrogation. Tomorrow he would document the next session and everything would be routine again. But that night, for the first time in 17 years of military service, Drax had trouble sleeping. Drax walked down the corridor toward the holding cells, his footsteps echoing in the quiet of the ship's lower level. It was early morning by ship time, 8 hours since Rachel Hayes had been dragged unconscious from the interrogation chamber. He carried a data pad to record the prisoner's condition, standard procedure before the next session. He didn't expect to find much. After what she'd endured, Rachel should be completely unresponsive. Catatonic. The Krell database was clear on this. 3 hours of neural disruption at maximum intensity caused complete mental breakdown in every known species. Subjects curled into fetal positions, rocking back and forth, unable to process reality. Some never recovered. Those who did took weeks of medical intervention. The holding cells were designed for maximum observation. Transparent aluminum walls on 3 sides, allowing guards to monitor prisoners constantly. Drax approached cell 7, already composing his report in his mind. Subject remains unconscious. No movement detected. Continuing standard protocol. He looked through the transparent wall and stopped walking so abruptly that his claws scraped against the floor. Rachel Hayes was awake. Not just awake. She was in the middle of a push-up, her body moving with controlled, deliberate precision. Down, pause, up. Down, pause, up. Her arms were steady, her form perfect. She completed the repetition, then another, then another. Drax's mind went blank. This was impossible. Scientifically impossible. He watched, unable to move, as Rachel finished what looked like her 20th push-up. She shifted smoothly into a sitting position against the back wall of the cell. Then she began rotating her shoulders slowly, first the right, then the left. Testing her range of motion. Checking her body's responses like a mechanic examining a machine. Her face was focused, calm. There were dark circles under her eyes and her skin was still pale, but her eyes were clear. Sharp. Alert. She tilted her head from side to side, stretched her neck, flexed her fingers one by one. This wasn't the behavior of a broken prisoner. This was someone conducting a systematic self-assessment. Drax felt something he rarely experienced: complete confusion. Every piece of data he'd studied about interrogation psychology said this couldn't happen. The neural chair didn't just cause pain. It overwhelmed the brain's ability to process information. It created trauma that took days or weeks to recover from. 8 hours ago, Rachel Hayes had been carried out unconscious, her mind shut down from stress. Now she looked like a soldier preparing for a mission. She must have sensed someone watching because her head turned toward the observation window. Her eyes locked onto Drax's. He expected to see fear. Trauma. The hollow, broken look of someone who'd been destroyed from the inside out. That's what he always saw in prisoners after interrogation. Instead, Rachel Hayes looked at him with cold calculation. She was studying him the same way he'd studied her. Assessing. Analyzing. No trembling. No tears. No signs of psychological collapse whatsoever. She held his gaze without blinking. No submission. No pleading. Just a direct, measuring stare that made Drax feel like he was the one being evaluated. Impossible, he whispered to himself. His training kicked in. He tapped his communicator with a shaking claw. Commander Vex, this is Drax. You need to come to holding cell 7 immediately. This better be important, Vex's irritated voice crackled back. I'm reviewing tomorrow's interrogation protocols. Sir, it's the human. Rachel Hayes. Drax struggled to find words. You need to see this yourself. 3 minutes later, Commander Vex arrived with 2 other interrogation specialists. All 3 of them crowded around the observation window, staring into the cell. Rachel was standing now, performing slow, controlled stretches. She bent forward at the waist, touching her toes easily, holding the position. Then she straightened and raised her arms above her head, interlacing her fingers and pushing upward. What is this? One of the specialists whispered. Is she exercising? Check the medical monitors, Vex ordered. Drax pulled up the data on his pad. Heart rate is elevated but stable. Blood pressure normal. Neural activity shows standard waking patterns. No signs of trauma response. No evidence of psychological breakdown. Commander, according to these readings, she's completely functional. That's not possible, Vex said flatly. Check the interrogation equipment logs. The neural chair must have malfunctioned. The intensity readings must have been wrong. Drax had already thought of that. His claws moved across the data pad, pulling up the equipment logs from yesterday's session. Sir, I'm looking at the records now. The device was operating at full capacity. All systems functioning normally. The readings were accurate. One of the specialists, a female Krell named Tora, stepped closer to the glass. Commander, I've been an interrogator for 9 years. I've processed over 200 subjects from 30 different species. I've never seen anything like this. Ever. Subjects don't recover from maximum intensity sessions. They certainly don't recover in 8 hours. Vex's claws drummed against the wall, a nervous habit Drax had never seen from the commander before. There must be an explanation. Enhanced physiology. Cybernetic implants. Some kind of drug resistance we haven't detected. We scanned her thoroughly during intake, Drax reported. No implants. No enhancements. No drugs in her system. She's baseline human biology. Inside the cell, Rachel finished her stretches and sat down cross-legged on the floor. She closed her eyes and began taking slow, deep breaths. Meditation. She was meditating. The 4 Krell stood in stunned silence, watching a species they'd assumed was fragile and weak do something that shouldn't have been biologically possible. Finally Vex spoke, his voice harder than before. If the device didn't malfunction, then we didn't push hard enough. We clearly failed to reach this species' actual breaking point. He turned to face the others, his eyes cold. Prepare the interrogation chamber. We're testing her again. Right now. If she can recover in 8 hours, then we need to understand exactly how much a human can actually endure before they break. Drax felt his stomach turn, but he nodded. Orders were orders. 2 guards entered the cell to retrieve Rachel. She stood calmly, offering no resistance as they bound her hands. As they led her past the observation window, she looked directly at Drax one more time. And she smiled. Not a happy smile. A knowing one. Like she'd just proven something important. They brought Rachel back to the interrogation chamber. The same neural chair. The same cold metal restraints. But this time the atmosphere felt different. Tense. Uncertain. Drax positioned himself at the observation console again, but his focus had changed. Yesterday he'd been documenting a standard interrogation. Today he was trying to understand something that made no scientific sense. The guard strapped Rachel into the chair with extra care, as if she might suddenly reveal hidden strength. She didn't resist. She simply watched them work, her expression neutral, her breathing steady and controlled. Commander Vex stood before her, his posture stiff. Human, you have demonstrated unusual recovery capability. But do not mistake this for strength. Everyone breaks eventually. Today we will find your limit. Rachel looked up at him. You still don't understand what you're dealing with. We understand perfectly. You're a fragile species with delusions of toughness. Vex moved to the control panel. Let me educate you on reality. He set the neural disruptor to maximum intensity immediately. No gradual increase. No warning. Just straight to the highest setting. A level that would stop most species' hearts within seconds. His claw hit the activation switch. Rachel's entire body went rigid. Every muscle locked simultaneously. Her back arched violently against the chair, tendons standing out like cables under her skin. A scream ripped from her throat, raw and primal. But Drax was watching her eyes. And that's when he saw something that made his blood run cold. Her eyes stayed open. Where? Despite the agony tearing through every nerve in her body, Rachel Hayes was still conscious. Still present. Still thinking. The scream faded into gasping breaths. The neural disruptor pulsed in waves, giving brief moments between the peaks of pain. In those microseconds of relief, Rachel spoke. Her voice was strained, broken, but determined. You don't understand. She gasped, her jaw clenched so tight Drax thought her teeth might shatter. Silence. Vex barked, increasing the intensity another level. Rachel's body convulsed. Another scream. But when it ended, she kept talking, forcing words out between waves of torture. Humans. We evolved as persistence hunters. Each word was a battle. We didn't chase prey for minutes. We chased them for days, across plains, under the sun, until they collapsed from exhaustion. Vex's hand hovered over the controls, hesitating. He was listening despite himself. Our bodies. Rachel continued, sweat pouring down her face, are built to endure. Built to keep going when everything says stop. It's in our DNA. In every cell. Irrelevant evolutionary history, Vex growled, but Drax noticed his voice lacked its usual confidence. He increased the power again. The device reached levels that should have caused immediate cardiac arrest. Rachel's back arched so severely that Drax heard something pop, a vertebra, maybe a rib. Her scream was unlike anything he'd ever heard, a sound of pure biological overload. But when the wave passed, she was still conscious. Still aware. Her eyes found Vex through the pain. We survived, childbirth, she wheezed. Women of my species endure hours, sometimes days, of pain that would kill most males of any species. They survive it, bring new life, and survive it again. Tora, the female interrogator, shifted uncomfortably beside Drax. Rachel's voice grew stronger somehow, as if speaking gave her something to focus on beyond the pain. We survived disease, starvation, injuries that should have been fatal. We broke bones, and kept walking. We lost limbs, and adapted. We faced extinction, again and again, and we're still here. Enough of this. Vex roared. His claws slammed the controls, pushing the device beyond maximum, into ranges marked dangerous on the panel. Warning lights flashed red. Rachel's scream cut off abruptly as her body seized completely. But her eyes were still locked on Vex, and there was something terrifying in that gaze. Not fear. Not submission. Understanding. Like she knew something he didn't. Pain is just information, she forced out, her voice barely a whisper now. It tells us something is wrong. But our brains, they don't stop. They adapt. Reroute. Find new pathways. We override our own limits, because survival demands it. Drax watched his monitoring equipment in disbelief. The readings were climbing to lethal levels. Neural stress that should have caused brain death. Cardiovascular strain that should have stopped her heart. But Rachel's vitals were holding. More than holding. Her body was adapting in real time. Look at the readings. Drax called out, unable to stop himself. Her heart rate is decreasing. She's entering some kind of controlled state. It was true. Despite the overwhelming pain signals, Rachel's heart rate was slowing. Her breathing was becoming deeper, more measured. She was doing something with her mind, some kind of meditation technique that was allowing her to process the impossible. Vex stared at the controls, then at Rachel, then back at the controls. His claws were trembling. The device is at 140% of maximum recommended output. This should be killing her. This is killing levels. How is she? Rachel's eyes rolled back. Finally, her consciousness surrendered. Her body went limp in the restraints. But the monitors told a different story. Her vital signs weren't crashing. They were stable. Strong. Her heart beat steadily. Her brain activity showed normal unconscious patterns, not trauma or damage. She wasn't dying. She was resting. Vex stood frozen, staring at the unconscious human. His hand slowly moved to deactivate the device. The humming stopped. Silence filled the chamber. Commander, Tora said quietly, what are we looking at here? Drax stepped forward, his eyes on Rachel's face. Peaceful now despite everything. He thought about her words. About human evolution. About a species that survived not through armor or claws or venom, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to give up. We made a mistake, Drax said, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. We thought we captured prey. Something weak. Something easily broken. He turned to face Vex and the others. But we didn't capture prey. We captured a predator. A kind the galaxy has never encountered before. They don't survive through physical strength. They survive through something more dangerous. An unbreakable will. The ability to endure anything and keep going. Vex looked at Rachel's unconscious form, then at the equipment still flashing warning lights about the dangerous levels it had reached. What kind of species? He whispered, unable to finish the question. Drax knew the answer now and it terrified him. The kind that would never stop coming. 4 hours later, Drax found himself walking back to the holding cells. He told himself it was routine. Just another prisoner check. Standard procedure before filing the final report. But his claws gripped the data pad tighter than necessary, and his hearts were beating faster than they should. He'd spent those 4 hours alone in his quarters, reviewing the footage from today's interrogation. Watching Rachel's vital signs. Reading through decades of Krell interrogation data, searching for any comparable case. There wasn't one. In the entire history of the Krell Dominion, across 47 conquered species and countless prisoners, no one had ever done what Rachel Hayes had done. Twice in one day. Twice she'd endured what should have killed her. And according to the medical monitors, her recovery time was getting shorter. The corridor to the holding cells was empty. Most of the crew were in their rest cycles. Only automated systems hummed in the background. Drax's footsteps echoed louder than usual in the silence. He reached cell 7 and looked through the transparent wall. Rachel was awake. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, hands resting on her knees, eyes closed. Her breathing was slow and rhythmic. Meditation again. The same way she'd recovered before. Drax stood there watching her for a long moment. She looked so small. So fragile. Her uniform was still torn, her hair messy, dark circles under her eyes. By every physical measure she should be broken. Destroyed. A shell of a person. Instead she looked centered. Calm. Like she was gathering strength from some deep well inside herself that the Krell couldn't touch. He made a decision that went against 17 years of military training. Drax entered the security code and the cell door hissed open. Rachel's eyes snapped open immediately. She was on her feet in seconds, dropping into a defensive stance despite having no weapons. Her eyes scanned him, looking for threats, calculating distances to the door. Easy, Drax said, raising his claws in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to take you back to the chair. Rachel didn't relax, but she didn't attack either. Then why are you here? Drax stepped fully into the cell, letting the door close behind him. This was a violation of every protocol in the Krell military handbook. Entering a prisoner's cell alone. Without backup. Without authorization. He could lose his rank for this. Worse. You've proven something today, human, he said quietly. Something that changes everything. Rachel's eyes narrowed. What? The Krell respect warriors above all else. Strength. Honor. The will to fight. What you endured today. Twice in one day. Drax shook his head slowly. No species in our records could survive that. Not the Thorians with their armored hides. Not the Vex with their distributed nervous systems. Not even the Krell ourselves. You should be dead or broken. But you're standing here, alert and ready to fight again. So what happens now? Rachel asked, her voice steady. You run more tests? Find my breaking point? Because I can tell you right now, you won't find it. I know, Drax said, and he meant it. That's what terrifies me. Rachel tilted her head, studying him with new interest. You're scared of me. I'm scared of what you represent. Drax pulled out his data pad and turned it to show her. Do you understand what happens next? I've already transmitted my report to the Dominion homeworld. Every piece of data from your interrogations. Every reading. Every measurement. By morning, the High Command will have analyzed everything. He tapped the screen. Humans are being classified as a Tier 1 threat species. The highest threat level in Krell doctrine. Not because of your weapons. Not because of your technology. But because of what you are. Rachel stepped closer, reading the screen. Drax saw her jaw tighten as she scanned the report. What we are, she repeated softly. A species that doesn't break, Drax said. We've conquered 47 species across 12 star systems. We win because we understand our enemies. We find their limits, their weaknesses, their breaking points. But you? He gestured at her. You have no breaking point. Pain doesn't stop you. Fear doesn't control you. Your bodies adapt and your minds refuse to surrender. So you're going to exterminate us, Rachel said flatly. Is that it? Kill us all because we're too dangerous to conquer? That's what the High Command will recommend. And they'll be right to do it. Drax pulled out a security override key from his armor. When your people come for you, and they will come, this becomes a war the Krell cannot win. Because you don't fight like other species. You don't surrender when you should. You keep coming, keep adapting, keep enduring until you win or there's nothing left. He held out the override key. But I want them to know something. When humans and Krell meet again, I want your people to understand that one Krell warrior recognized the truth. Rachel looked at the key, then at him. What truth? That you don't survive through power. You survive because you refuse to break. That makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He pressed the key into her hand. There's an escape pod in Corridor 7. I've disabled the security systems and cleared the guards. You have 6 minutes before the next patrol cycle. Rachel stared at the key in her palm. You're committing treason. Yes. They'll execute you for this. Probably. Then why? Drax met her eyes, this tiny human who'd survived the impossible. Because the Krell respect warriors. And you've earned that respect. When your fleet arrives to rescue you, I want them to find you alive and free. I want them to know that their first contact with the Krell wasn't the torture of a helpless prisoner. It was the moment we realized we'd awakened something we should have left alone. Rachel closed her fist around the key. For the first time since her capture, Drax saw something other than determination in her eyes. Gratitude. Respect. She stood at attention and gave him a formal military salute. Thank you, warrior. Drax returned the salute, a gesture of equals. Go. Your 6 minutes started 30 seconds ago. Rachel ran. Drax walked slowly to the center of the empty cell and stood at attention, waiting. 2 minutes later, the alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed. He heard boots pounding in the corridor. Shouting. The sound of the escape pod launching. Commander Vex burst through the cell door, flanked by 6 guards with weapons drawn. What have you done? Vex roared. Drax stood perfectly still, claws at his sides. I honored a warrior. You've committed treason. Released a prisoner. Given classified information to an enemy species. Yes, sir. You'll be executed for this. I know, sir. Vex's claws trembled with rage. What? Why would you throw away everything for one human? Drax looked his commander in the eyes. Because someone needed to understand what we've started here. In a few weeks, maybe months, a human fleet will arrive. They'll be coming for their people. And they won't stop. They won't surrender. They won't break. Because that's what humans do. They endure. He straightened his shoulders. When that happens, I wanted them to know that one Krell understood. That we didn't just torture and murder one of theirs. That we showed honor when it mattered. Maybe, just maybe, that will make a difference when our species meet again. Vex stared at him, speechless. Guards seized Drax's arms, binding his claws. As they dragged him toward the brig, he looked back at the empty cell. Rachel Hayes was gone, carrying with her the knowledge of what had happened here. And soon, all of humanity would know that the Krell Dominion had awakened something they couldn't break. A species that refused to surrender. A species that would never stop coming. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, racing away in a stolen escape pod, Rachel smiled. Because now they knew. Now everyone knew. Humans didn't break. They endured. And that made all the difference.